But sometimes more unexpected sounds grab our attention. Like this desert rain frog. Squeaking viral sensation. Unacceptable! 11 million hits and counting.
When Disney released The Princess and the Frog in 2009, people talked about how it was about time Disney made a film with the Black Princess. There were commercials praising the company for reaching a milestone for more racial diversity in their official princess line. Critics complimented the film for its high-quality traditional animation, standard for Disney as usual until 2011, complete with beautiful visuals and a nice little story the whole family can enjoy. At the time, it seemed like this film would go down in history as another Disney classic that millions of people will look back on and fondly remember, knowing every lyric to every song and the iconic moments the characters went through. But a year later, those expectations were too much. According to Box Office Mojo, The Princess and the Frog made $104.4 million at the box office domestically, but failed to go beyond the $105 million production budget. Even though many people who saw it liked it, it didn't do as well as Disney wanted it to. Over the years, all the other Disney princess films released after The Princess and the Frog made more domestic money, with Tangled, Brave, and Moana making over $200 million, and Frozen making over $400 million. There were a lot of theories going around for why The Princess and the Frog didn't bring in as much money as it could have. Maybe boys didn't like to watch a film with the word princess in the title. Maybe people weren't ready for a black Disney princess yet. Maybe some Christians really hated voodoo and didn't like it being in the film. Maybe Prince Naveen should have been clearly black like Tiana was. Maybe the only good songs in the whole film were Almost There and Friends on the Other Side.
Alright, y'all. One more time. It don't matter what you look like. It don't nobody gonna sing with me. Okay.
There's no definite answer for why The Princess and the Frog didn't do as well as expected, but there's probably more to it than the surface criticism suggests. With how the first black Disney princess is portrayed, how her story is handled, and how the film itself handles its setting. The Princess and the Frog bastardized accurate historical representation and failed to treat black characters equally in storytelling by denying Tiana the same escapist, fantastical world that most other princesses have access to. So, Tiana's character only being tied to her restaurant and her lack of other interests, personality, and complex emotions outside of her restaurant don't make her that interesting of a character. She's got her drive and her cooking, which are great, but that's pretty much all she has. She's like a straight man character, but with very little going for her. The writers probably shouldn't have made Tiana a workaholic in the first place, but you can have an interesting straight man character who doesn't take anyone's shit. Like, look at the Final Fantasy VII Remake's Cloud Strife. He's hot and mean and he doesn't joke around much, but he still has depth to him, and it's clear when he goes through his character development. Through Naveen, Tiana learns how to have a little more fun, but it's mostly obscured by not only how much she still talks about her one and only hobby.
Well, Miss Froggy, do you understand what you need now, child?
Yes, I do, Mama Odie. I need to dig a little deeper and work even harder to get my restaurant.
But how little character she has anyway. Ariel never lacked for a sense of fun as she explored sunken ships and collected her artifacts. Tiana's sense of fun got left behind in her single-minded pursuit of her restaurant. Thanks Disney for more boring princess representation. I've always wanted more boring princess representation. I can't even choose which animated black princess I like more. It's just her and only her. She's the only black 100% Disney princess, and she's kinda dull.
Derek? What else?
What else is there?
But Tiana's one-dimensionality, lack of energy, and sense of fun looks even worse whenever Lottie's on screen. If the side characters are more interesting and enjoyable to see and learn about compared to the main character, then something's wrong. Something's really wrong. So wrong that many people remember Lottie over Tiana. Tiana's lack of ties to the villain of the story also makes their little standoff at the end really corny and emotionally flat. They don't have a meaningful connection, so the stakes don't feel as important as they could have. Because for one thing, Tiana doesn't even know Dr. Facilier's real name.
You were messing with the Shadow Man?
And he doesn't know what she's talking about when she tells him it's slime and not mucus, which makes it worse.
I got news for you, Shadow Man. It's not slime, it's mucus!
Silence, traitor.
I also don't believe Tiana and Lottie's friendship because we don't see them have any meaningful moments except when Lottie gets a flat character arc where she listens to her best friend for once. Lottie doesn't actively support Tiana's dream or take time off her day to listen and understand Tiana's feelings even when they're alone. It made me wonder if they were really best friends at all. I get that Tiana didn't want handouts, but Lottie could have been supportive in other ways. I mean, Tiana was clearly at her fucking limit when she walked out with that sparkly blue dress on at the costume party. So, why didn't Lottie ask about it? They could have tied that with Lottie's character. She could have went, Tia, what's wrong? You look like a princess straight out of a fairy tale and you got your head down. Because we see Tiana talk to Lottie about her dream with finding a prince and all that, but Lottie doesn't even do that with her own best friend.
It was not that fucking hard if the writers just put in some more effort.
One of the Princess and the Frog's biggest criticisms was how long Tiana was a frog. She becomes one 29 minutes in, after kissing Naveen when he mistakes her for a princess at a costume party. For most of the film, Tiana isn't actually a young black woman, but a little green amphibian hopping around with Naveen, who has already turned into a frog himself because of Dr. Facilier's magic. They only really turn human again when the film is coming to an end, when they have a wedding in the Louisiana swamp as frogs and break the spell with a kiss. Tiana's the only Disney princess to turn into an animal at all, much less for the majority of the film's running time. None of the other princesses after her become non-human creatures, and Merida doesn't even turn into a bear. Her mom does.
Sorry, I don't speak bear.
Both Tiana and Naveen stay frogs for a long time. They escape dangers as frogs, they bond with each other as frogs, they fall in love as frogs. Tiana's blackness is hidden most of the time because most of the time she's a frog. Tiana's transformation also stripped away whatever representation black girls and women wanted to see in a Disney film for years. The first heavily marketed dark-skinned black princess who looks like some of these people in the audience becomes a frog not even half an hour into the film, and many people were disappointed and felt cheated out of their representation. Whatever time black women and girls could have seen themselves as beautiful and important in a Disney film is gone as soon as Tiana transforms. If they were human, or at least if Tiana were human, Naveen could have gotten that jaw-dropping moment where Tiana wears this dress that turns heads and stops time, and he's just staring at her from how beautiful she looks, while realizing himself that he truly, deeply loves her. But no, we had to settle for frogs. Many protagonists of color in American animated films are turned into non-human creatures for most of the running time. There are no other major black animated protagonists for Disney, Blue Sky, and Pixar. Tiana, Lance Sterling, and Joe Gardner are the first and only black animated characters as leads for major films for these studios, and they all turn into something that takes their blackness off screen. Frogs, birds, or weird blue blobs after they die. Home and Into the Spider-Verse shouldn't be exceptions to the rule. Tiana's blackness not only denies her humanity for her story, but also denies her access to the typical fairy tale ending people would expect in a Disney film in the first place. Snow White, Cinderella, Jasmine, Aurora, Ariel, Belle, Rapunzel, Merida, and Anna are all princesses who, at some point, end their stories living in castles or palaces. Out of all the princesses in the official Disney princess line, Jasmine's the only princess of color that's given the royal treatment at the end of her film, living the rest of her life in leisure, like her white counterparts do, while enjoying the privileges of royalty. Moana may rule her people and have a more fantastical story compared to Tiana, but she's still not a princess in canon. She even says so herself.
Okay, first, I'm not a princess. I'm the daughter of the chief.
Same difference.
No.
If you wear a dress and you have an animal sidekick, you're a princess.
Tiana's story comes from an old fairy tale, but like Mulan and Pocahontas, she lives in a real place anchored down with real-life problems that real-life people face, like sexism, colonialism, and racism. Specifically, she marries a prince, but in the end, she owns and runs a restaurant to get her happy ending. Tiana's palace is only called that. It's a restaurant. Instead of living the rest of her days in a faraway land with Prince Naveen, she and her husband serve other people in a literal sense, not as monarchs to subjects, but as workers to customers. Compared to how other princess character stories end, Tiana's happily ever after sticks out like a sore thumb for a character who's supposed to be an actual princess. She's the only princess without a castle or a palace we know of. The message of working hard for dreams is an admirable one, but that idea is never explored outside of The Princess and the Frog and any other Disney princess film. The Princess and the Frog is another one of those films that doesn't give Black people the space to temporarily leave reality with escapism. Many, if not most media that Black audiences consume are about their oppression or some kind of trauma, something they have to overcome. Racism, colorism, poverty, and all other kinds of hardships that they couldn't even escape from with a Disney film. That's why there are so many Black people on social media who want more escapist stories about Black people, where their stories aren't immediately tied to trauma and hardship involving real-life oppression. But this film doesn't lean into its escapism like all the other canon princess films did. Tiana and Naveen's happily ever after is working from 9 to 5 instead of double shifts. Author Alyssa Cole's commentary on the impact of princesses of color and escapism said, "I couldn't help but be irked at all of the memes and articles about how princesses were cancelled, when in fact only one very specific subset of women had ever had the chance to be restricted by and throw off the mantle of princesshood in the first place." Black girls, and women in particular who wanted to see a Black princess practice fantasies of being waited on hand and foot, don't get that small privilege, like with Tangled, Snow White, Beauty and the Beast, and other films. Not only is Tiana and the Black audience denied the usual happily ever after most white audiences take for granted, but the film itself is mostly disconnected from other aspects of escapist fairy tales. Naveen, while being a prince, is cut off from his parents for irresponsibility and has to look for a job, eventually landing one as a waiter at Tiana's restaurant. We don't know what Naveen's kingdom Maldonia looks like either. None of the characters in The Princess and the Frog even talk about it enough that audiences can at least get an idea of what it's like there. So it's just a place that's mentioned, but never explored. Previous editor of Racialicious Latoya Peterson said, "Tiana isn't a helpless girl waiting to be rescued, which will set feminist minds at ease, but the film's grounding in reality robs children of the huge Disney fantasy world in which to release their imaginations." Who knows, maybe Maldonia will be a Kingdom Hearts world someday. Keeping Tiana and Naveen as royalty only in name takes away whatever power they could have had as monarchs that actually practiced their titles. Tiana's best friend in the film, Lottie, is treated more like the conventional princess than the protagonist herself, Both Lottie and her father are upper-class characters who don't have to worry about living from paycheck to paycheck. Tiana becomes a princess at the end of the film, but she and Naveen celebrate this by serving people in New Orleans with food, and not by greeting their subjects in Maldonia. They both could have had the expected privileges of royalty while also serving Naveen's people as prince and princess. We could have seen them juggle both royal life and everyday life. Both characters could have had equal footing to white princesses and princes in other films, like Ariel and Eric, Rapunzel and Flynn Rider, and Belle and Beast, while not sacrificing the goals and lessons they needed to gain in the story. With how little the escapist fairy tale aspect comes into play, Disney seemed to take a more realistic approach with the film's setting and struggles Tiana has to go through, especially when and where her story takes place. Even then, they failed to properly create a story surrounding those aspects just the same. Tiana struggles day in and day out. She struggles to get by, balance 2 jobs, and get enough money to build her dream restaurant. She works 2 jobs as a waitress and gets right back to work after she finishes her night shift. Tiana's struggle as a hard worker who barely gets the minimum amount of sleep per day can no doubt be relatable to many people. She's a black woman in the 1920s breaking her back for her dream, and it's completely understandable why some people would love that about her. Tiana literally works for what she wants. She's the first and only princess to have a paid job. Disney usually doesn't portray characters who are explicitly struggling to keep food on the table with work. It isn't unrealistic for Tiana to do what she does in the film, and her drive is admirable. But even though every little penny counts for her situation, it's all Disney was willing to explore outside of anything else in the film's setting. The Princess and the Frog doesn't really acknowledge what the 1920s are like for black people. Some people even interpreted Mr. Fenner's comments as classist more than racist, after he told Tiana she was outbid for the abandoned sugar mill down payment for her restaurant.
Woman of your background, you're better off where you at. And don't forget your poor daddy. Now, that was one hard-working man.
The film whitewashes the 1920s and black people's experiences during the Jim Crow era to the point where there are colorblind white characters that don't seem to care what color their best friends or lovers are. This is most evident with Lottie and her father. Lottie only befriended Tiana through her mother, a seamstress who made princess dresses for her as a little girl. Lottie doesn't comment on Tiana's race or situation at all, ironically making more people give even more praise to her bubbly character already because she was just a decent person to Tiana. Lottie's father illustrates this just as much, casually sitting in a black-owned diner and being nice to the black patrons and workers there, where the film frames him as a harmless rich man who spoils his daughter. Like all U.S. states at the time, Jim Crow laws were held as standard to refuse black people the right to go wherever they wanted and further discriminate against them. Though the saying for these laws was separate but equal, it was anything but for almost a century. Terror was regularly inflicted onto black people all over the U.S., and most of it was ignored and excused. Legal justice wasn't something black people could look forward to when it came to lynchings, rape, and other violent crimes. This kind of violence was so common during these years that Ida B. Wells, an anti-lynching black activist, published an essay in 1892 advocating for self-help in the black American community, in which she explains how black people should protect themselves and their families from violence by bearing firearms to scare away anyone who wanted to drag them out their homes. The only times an Afro-American who was assaulted got away has been when he had a gun and used it in self-defense. With The Princess and the Frog's representation of the setting, there are no explicit references to racism or even segregation that people could misinterpret. Tiana's apparently too busy working for her dream to care about or acknowledge any racism throughout the film, except for her encounter with the Fenner brothers, as well as the other black characters around her. While black people's lives didn't and still don't solely revolve around race, it's really unrealistic for Jim Crow era black Americans to disregard the blatant dangerous racism they faced, especially if they were working class, especially if they lived in the South, and especially if they were women. There are no signs segregating places by race. There are no colored or white drinking fountains. Even though the South had separate streetcars for black and white people, in the beginning of the film, the streetcar Tiana and her mother took to get home held black and white passengers all the same. Unless Tiana's father served in France, he wouldn't have the badges on his uniform like in the photo she has on her mirror. Black American soldiers didn't get awards for serving in World War I. They didn't even get formal welcome home parades if they came back. Disney's known for whitewashing and romanticizing history, no matter where or when it is, and they're not going to show violent racism in their books and TV shows anytime soon. But the presentation for this film is especially careless. Like with Pocahontas, the Princess and the Frog hides the real systemic, horrific oppression that people of color face in this country for years. For Disney to sugarcoat America's own racist past is damning, because a lot of Americans still struggle to come to terms with this country's more bloody, discriminatory history, and there are many people today who can remember segregation and fighting for their rights as people. Racism and racial injustice still exist today, and the effects of Jim Crow and lack of legal protection for Black people are still trickling down into modern society. The creators made a conscious choice to set the story where it is. They could have put Tiana and Naveen and all the other characters in a vague, fictional world like the other canon princesses. They could have put them in a more modern setting. They could have at least put them in 1920s Harlem. But not only did they set the story where it is, they also made it clear when it takes place. From the newspaper, a man reads in Tiana and her mother's streetcar announcing Wilson's election, to the uniform and distinguished service cross Tiana's father wears in his photo. I mean, hell, even the France in Beauty and the Beast isn't specific enough to pin down. There aren't any serious historical giveaways you can rely on, except for this throwaway line Cogsworth says.
And as I always say, if it's not broke, don't fix it.
But even that doesn't specify when the story takes place. And there are no real systemic problems with the story's society anyway. At least in the original animated film.
Teaching another girl to read.
So in all these canon princess films are vaguely historical in its time through the character's fashion and the story's backdrops, The Princess and the Frog was grounded in a reality other Disney films didn't have to pay attention to. The mixing of historical events and whitewashed histories poorly developed and superficial, something that was probably in the film at all to avoid ignoring history altogether and getting backlash for it. If The Princess and the Frog's writers thought more about the decisions they were making with the plot, characters, and setting, it could have been a more beloved film. Maybe it would have done better at the box office, and it would have been as popular as the other Disney princess films that came after it. Now, what does any of this have to do with Black Panther? It's not technically a Disney film, it's a Marvel one first, and there aren't any singing animals anywhere. But Black Panther is one of the few major films with a black lead who's also royalty, and it did much better than people probably thought it would. It also gave black people what they probably were looking for in The Princess and the Frog and more. Black Panther was released in February of 2018 and had a much better reaction compared to The Princess and the Frog. A domestic reaction of over $700 million. Black Panther's the highest grossing superhero film in the US of all time. It has a mostly black cast and won Oscars for Best Original Score, Best Costume Design, and Best Production Design. It also made more money than Iron Man, Thor, and Captain America: The First Avenger combined. Black Panther became a staple in black culture for many reasons, including its fully realized escapist fantasy, as many of the characters are superheroes and royalty in a fictional kingdom the audience explores and experiences. When discussing fantastical genres like sci-fi, author Walter Mosley said, "The genre speaks most clearly to those who are dissatisfied with the way things are. Adolescents, post-adolescents, escapists, dreamers, and those who have been made to feel powerless." And this may explain the appeal that science fiction holds for a great many African Americans. Science fiction promises a future full of possibility, alternative lives, and even regret. Even Killmonger's internal and external conflicts with his identity and blackness are presented wholeheartedly, something The Princess and the Frog failed to do. Black Panther also kept the character's blackness on screen for the entirety of the film and celebrated it. Like with the Kingdom of Wakanda emphasizing different African cultures and presenting them as normal and beautiful. While the protagonist T'Challa is branded as a superhero, he's also a prince-turned-king with his intelligent sister Shuri, a princess who makes fun of her brother and builds advanced technology throughout. Black Panther had a greater impact on the black community than The Princess and the Frog did, an impact that was already clear with its box office alone. There's still a largely untapped audience for black people and escapist stories, but films like Black Panther show how to do them right. Now, don't get it twisted, The Princess and the Frog isn't by any means a worthless film. It introduced the first black Disney princess to the official princess line. It has an inspiring story of perseverance, and the animation is polished and breathtaking. And look at this cover art of my DVD. It's so pretty. Tiana and Navene's relationship is cute. It's not amazing, but it's cute, and Dr. Facilier and his musical number are phenomenal. He even got a cute anime guy counterpart in that Twisted Wonderland game. I'm convinced it and Kingdom Hearts are in the same universe. This film might not have achieved the success the creators planned, but the fact that it exists is noteworthy. Anika Noni Rose, who voiced Tiana, had her character be left-handed and have dimples like her. Rose said people still come up to her since The Princess and the Frog's release and tell her how important Tiana is to them. People have waited so long for Princess Tiana. I had a man come up to me on the street in New York the year it came out, and he was like, "I'm so happy because..." And then he burst into tears. It was the first time he was able to buy his daughter a princess doll that looked like her. People have been waiting. I've been waiting. And with Disney's recent announcement for rebranding Splash Mountain and rightfully giving Tiana her own ride, we might get a small sense of escapism that wasn't there in the film before. Who doesn't love Mardi Gras? But if there was more thought put into the story and how these characters are portrayed, it might not have been almost there in being a memorable, impactful film like Black Panther. But it might have been another beloved classic Disney princess film, complete with a faraway land, a palace, and a happily ever after many little girls of every race and color dream of and see fulfilled with their favorite princesses, including princesses that look like them.